Yeah, and I'll get started. I have Skip's slides ready to go after that. So I'm going to talk about a few steps for non-toxic organic lawn care, because years ago when I worked at the Sustainability Institute at Malloy College, actually, let me do it this way. When I worked at Sustainability Institute at Malloy College, I had a chance to actually, oh, sorry, it's not advancing. Oh, there we go. Okay. I had a chance to run an organic turf trade show for 9 years, so I learned quite a bit from all the organic landscapers. But starting off with the basics, things that we should know about chemicals. I've worked a lot with local breast cancer groups as well. Chemicals, you know, pesticides are chemicals that we add intentionally to the environment to kill living things. So the word, even the part of the word side comes from Latin. It means to kill. You know, we have herbicides, fungicides, all that we are using to kill living things. So something to think about right there. And pesticides can be toxic to bees, fish, and other aquatic life. It's estimated by Dr. Pimentel at Cornell University that 7 million birds are killed each year in the United States alone, just from lawn care pesticides. It's not even including agriculture. And here on Long Island, I think most of us probably realize that the water that we drink comes from underneath us. We have our aquifers underneath the ground. So whatever we use on the land will end up in our drinking water, and then we have to filter it out, hopefully. So a few of the main things to know about pesticides is that there are, you know, 3 major areas of health impacts that they can have. There's many studies done on pesticides that show a link to breast cancer and other types of cancer, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, especially in golf course superintendents, it's been found. There was a World Health Organization report on Roundup a few years ago that said even Roundup is now considered a carcinogen, and unfortunately it's used quite widely. Certain pesticides are suspected of disrupting the body's hormone system or its endocrine disruption. They can either mimic or block natural estrogens and other hormones. Some pesticides, especially insecticides, can damage the nervous system. So what we're talking about today is the way to avoid all of that. Especially we want to be careful about using pesticides around children and our pets and all of that. So when we're talking about organics, the goal of an organic maintenance program is to establish a healthy soil ecology, which provides your turf with natural defenses against weeds, disease, and other pests. You can see here in this picture, the fungi, nematodes, earthworms. Earthworms, of course, are not microscopic, but they are definitely important for aerating the soil. So starting off with some of the steps for organic lawn care, number 1 is your maintenance practices, or cultural practices, they're also referred to. So I'll talk mostly about mowing and watering. For mowing, what you want to do is not cut the grass too short. If you can keep it to 2 or even 3 inches, what that does is it allows the grass plant to have more space to do its photosynthesis. So that means that the roots can grow deeper, which helps the plant to be stronger and grow, you know, more healthily. And there are ways to measure with your machine, your mowing machine, how to do that. So this was a study that was actually done here on Long Island by Cornell Cooperative Extension. And it shows that just by the mowing height alone, you can help control the number of dandelions and other weeds that you get. And the reason for that is growing the grass taller actually shades out the weed seeds. So on the left side of the screen, I think it was cut to 1 inch, or I'm sorry, 3 inches where you see the least amount. And then it goes down to 1.5 inches where you see more of the dandelions. And a word about dandelions, although you can eat them, of course, eat the leaves, they tend to grow less in soil that is rich in calcium. So we'll talk about pH and calcium in a few minutes as well. A word about watering. Ideally, with an organic lawn, you want to water infrequently but deeply, only about once every 7 to 10 days in the summer, only when there hasn't been a good rain. And the important thing is to make sure that the water goes down deep into the roots. So, frequent but shallow watering means it helps make the roots shorter, which makes the plant itself weaker. So it's better infrequent and deep. Promoting soil life is the second step, mainly talking about composting and organic fertilizer here. And Skip will get into this a bit more about the benefits of compost. But compost contains beneficial microorganisms that we saw in the pictures earlier, the bacteria and fungi and all that good stuff, and also the organic material that these microorganisms feed on. So this is vital, especially if you're transitioning from a chemical-laden lawn to an organic program. And I always recommend earthworm castings if you can find them at a good nursery, because they're excellent fertilizer. They provide micronutrients and the beneficial microorganisms, and you're fairly certain to get a consistent product this way, even more so than compost, which can go through different goes through a process of composting, and you get a sort of a different product each time. But earthworm castings are great, exactly what they sound like. It's earthworm poop, basically. Again, part of promoting the soil life is providing the soil with fertilizer, if where it's needed. We want to look for organic fertilizer, and there really is no legal definition of that word in terms of fertilizers, but you want to look at the numbers, because the organic fertilizers don't harm the soil life. They're less damaging to the aquifers and coastal waters than the synthetic fertilizers, because those tend to be quick release nitrogen. You have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is the NPK on the bag. So when you see the organic brands there, you'll notice that the first number is less than 10 or 12. And you might be saying, well, shouldn't I be looking for more nitrogen? Doesn't that green up the grass? But at least with the organic fertilizers, it's naturally releasing. It'll be broken down by the bacteria. Whereas with the synthetic fertilizers, you get a lot of nitrogen, but as mentioned, it's water soluble, and it'll be running right off the next time there's a rain. So with soil pH is step 3, another thing to think about. Grass likes to be in the range of about neutral on the pH scale. So you can buy, cheap pH tests there at the nursery for a few bucks and test your soil and see if it's acidic or alkaline. And I usually recommend for Long Island soil to look for calcitic lime, because again, the calcium helps reduce the dandelions over time, and to look for pelletized rather than powder, because you don't want to be inhaling a powder. It's just easier to spread in the spreader. And then after all that, pest control is step 4. Don't panic and reach for chemical poisons. There are almost always safer non-toxic alternatives. And if you think about it this way, the weeds and insects are signals of underlying problems. And the idea is really always to feed the soil to increase the plant health. So preventing weeds, we talked a little bit about this already. Cut the grass high to shade out the weed seeds. Thicker turf will also crowd out weed seeds. So it's a good idea to seed and fertilize in the fall to give your grass a head start on the weeds for the spring. And then we also talked about lime and adding calcium to reduce dandelions. And balancing the pH reduces crabgrass. So this is just an example of someone actually hand pulling a weed. It does happen sometimes, rather than just spraying chemicals. But the idea is that once you pull out a weed, you want to cover up the patch with grass seed. Fescue is a good blend for Long Island. because if you leave an open patch, it's sort of an invitation for weeds to grow there, because the seeds are, weed seeds are just ubiquitous in the soil. So a few products to look for, I'll just mention quickly. Corn gluten is made from a type of protein in corn that actually stops weed seeds from germinating. So if you put it down very early in the spring, like in March, even when it's still a little cold, when the forsythia start to come out, those yellow bushes, that can be used as a pre-emergent weed control, and it's just made from corn. Milky spore is a type of, it's a sort of a biological disease that is safe for humans, but it attacks the white grubs that tend to eat the grass, and those white grubs grow up to be the Japanese beetle grub. The Japanese beetle, rather, that fly around in the summer. We have also insecticidal soaps and oils that you can spray. Some of the soaps have potassium salts of fatty acids. They disrupt the cell membranes of insects, so they're particularly effective against soft-bodied insects and mites, things like that. But you want to always look for a vegetable-based oil rather than a synthetic one. And of course, we have beneficial insects such as the praying mantis and ladybug and lacewings. But again, we don't want to be spraying pesticides if we're seeking to use, to implement the use of beneficials in our garden as well. So just the summary of organic lawn care tips. Organics is more than product replacement. It's your practices as well. Feeding the soil, building up those beneficial microbes, which Skip will talk about, and that organics and chemicals don't mix, because basically if we're putting down chemicals that kill the life in the soil, it's kind of counterproductive.